Soul Catcher Simp. My name's Zach. I want to do a character study of the wizard Silent today from The Black Company. The Black Company is my favorite fantasy series of all time. It means a lot to me. It means so much to me. It's impossible to explain properly without me sounding like I'm psychotic. And Silent is one of the characters who I've been gravitating towards lately. I think that he's a fascinating subject. I think he's one of the more relatable characters of the Black Company. The thing that immediately made me fall in love with the character was something that Croker wrote about him in the first Black Company book, where he's like, Silent, he doesn't care what the Annals had to say about them. Like, he doesn't care how he's remembered by history. Of course, Silent has taken a vow of silence and speaks in hand signals. He has a remarkably unique presence within the Black Company mercenaries. And although he didn't care how he was remembered, he didn't care how Croker wrote about him in the company history, he did demonstrate respect during the company readings, right? In those days, the company were in service to this person doing this and that. He did show a lot of respect to the tradition. I think there's a lot of interesting contradictions within Silent that make him feel extremely human, especially when we compare him to the other wizards of the Black Company. One Eye and Goblin, I love them so much. They provide a lot of comedy, and in the later books, even more pathos. But Silent is unique among those three, right? Silent feels more of a threatening character. And I don't know, I've been drawn to him recently. I think that I see, I want to say I see a lot of myself in him, but I'm not really sure if that's accurate. I think that I want to see a lot of myself in him. So let's go through the Black Company wiki. I'm going to read parts of it and then provide my own insight about what it says. Silent. And it starts with exactly what I was talking about just a minute ago. Of all the company, he is the least concerned about the image he will present in the annals. He does not care whether people like or hate him, does not care where he has been or where he is going. Sometimes I wonder if he cares whether he lives or dies. Croker describing Silent in the Black Company. Silent was a dangerous wizard of the Black Company throughout the annals of the Books of the North, Port of Shadows, and the short stories of the Long Run arc. Non-vocal by choice, he took a vow of total silence at some point in his murky past, and he never disclosed the reason. I think that's part of why I find the Black Company books so enduring, so constantly enduring. Like, I'm constantly thinking about those books because everything has a mystery to it. Everyone has several mysteries to their character because that's how Glenn Cook writes. That's how Glenn Cook composes. That's how Glenn Cook paints his characters. Silent took a vow of silence, but we never know exactly why. We never know what drove him to that point. And there's a poetic part of me that loves the idea of this almost of this extremely deadly wizard in this extremely gothic fantasy army outfit, kind of draped in the aesthetics of a mad monk. Right, I kind of really enjoy that. And it's hard not to see the vow of silence in deafening qualities. Often, without saying a word, he remains the loudest voice in the room. And of course, the only thing that he does say in this entire series uh, probably is the most impactful thing anyone said in the entire series as well. Um, he says Dorothea Senjak at the end of The White Rose. he says Lady's true name. And that will always be one of my favorite, most exciting and riveting moments in fantasy literature. But you have to see like that vow of silence as some sort of offshoot of some personal failure, personal trauma, or some personal pilgrimage, right? Like if anybody here in this group, if I want to see more interiority from any one of the soldiers, it's Silent. I've always been fascinated by Silent, and especially in the parts where Glenn Cook kind of insists on him, places more importance on him than he would do so like normally to any other kind of character, even Raven. Silent is a character of a lot of importance, and I hope that we get closer to figuring out why that is as this study progresses. He established a close but platonic relationship with Darling that would outlive even his membership in the company. The two communicated in a finger speech that became an important part of the communication repertoire of the senior members. I would like to talk about that for a second too. What I love to analyze most about the Black Company is Glenn Cook's investigations of idolized women, right? Of women, of the deification of women by desperate and hopeless men. Maybe I relate to that on a personal level. I just find it entirely gripping. You know, the way that Croker absolutely idolizes, adores, deifies Lady. How an entire region of fantasy idolizes Lady. How Soulcatcher deifies herself as a deification unto herself. How the reader deifies someone like Soulcatcher, like me. I'm the Soulcatcher simp, obviously. Like, what does that do to those women? What does that do to their physical poetry, to their walking symbolism? It does a lot. It does a hell of a lot. Almost an endless amount of analysis can be done just using that lens, using that as a POV, as our viewpoint. So Darling is another one of these women who've been deified by the book itself. She is the White Rose. She's the savior, the chosen one. And the two men of the Black Company who become most devoted to her are Raven and Silent. Now, this isn't a character study of Raven. Raven has his own reasons for doing so. And maybe we'll do a character study of Raven later on. And I have talked about that briefly in previous videos. If you want to see my take on Raven and his connection to Darling, go watch some of my earlier Black Company videos. But Silent was the other member who was deeply devoted to her. Of course, they have a shared isolation. Darling being unable to speak, and Silent being non-vocal by choice. There's that kind of shared isolation, which could be seen as a shared strength. I'm sure that Silent is someone who views that as a shared strength. I like the Silent and Darling romance here because it's extremely quiet, maybe one of the quietest in all of fantasy literature. I like the I like the love without possession aspect of Silent. This is a way that he differs quite monumentally from Raven. I think that Silent is devoted to Darling, in love with her, and never asks for anything in return. Always offering her his protection, offering her his company, offering her his magical expertise, and ultimately offering her his life, sacrificing himself for her, pitifully, pathetically, and heartbreakingly. And I think it is kind of interesting to look at the Silver Spike and compare Raven's death in that final battle to Silent's death. Silent's death is selfless. Silent's death is egoless. Silent's death is all for Darling. And both weep as he sacrifices himself. Raven's death is far from selfless. Once again, this is not a character study of Raven, but just very quickly, I see him as Aragorn, or your typical loner, super macho action or fantasy protagonist, but deconstructed and deformed archetypally. So when he dies, it's extremely pathetic, even more pathetic than Silence, because Raven believes that within his death, he will have earned Darling's forgiveness and love once more. But of course, he puts himself in a position where Darling is forced to have Raven killed in order to save everybody. I love that Silent is, yeah, a seemingly pretty selfless person. His philosophy to me is just so interesting because it's very difficult to articulate. Like, it's hard for me to explain to you the philosophy that I see within the character Silent, but I feel it, you know. I think it is possible to communicate it, but maybe not verbally. I think it's fascinating stuff. Silent was a tall white man with a long, dreary face and a dusky complexion. Underneath his shirt, he always wore a small leather bag on a thong around his neck. This trick bag was filled with noxious oddments like putrefied bat's ears or elixir of nightmare, according to Croker. His age is not established firmly, but Croker's mention of old gray heads during an isolated conversation between the young Chasing Midnight and Silent, Goblin and One Eye and Bone Eaters strongly suggests that he is at least middle-aged. The fact he joined the Black Company before Croker suggests he is older than Croker himself, but does not seem to be in the supernaturally advanced age ranges of One Eye or Goblin. Yeah, I think that just the image of Silent is really cool. Well, really cool to someone who loves, you know, the poetics of fantasy archetypes. I think he's an extremely captivating image. The way that Glenn Cook describes this character, paints this character, presents this character, and I think that the best way to really get to the heart of each character is to find what that character is idolizing. Because I think that The Black Company is a book about people projecting emotions that may or may not be real, but are the only thing that's keeping them alive in such a desperate, desolate, and destructive universe, right? So a lot of people are projecting love and eroticism onto women, for instance. People like Goblin and One Eye are projecting things onto each other, projecting things onto their environment, schemes, things of that sort. Whereas Silent, what he's projecting onto Darling, I would never truly call it erotic. It's not like a sexual romantic obsession like with Croker and the lady, or with Willow and the lady in Soulcatcher later on. It's not erotically charged. It's a pathetic devotion, but it's a devotion that I find so so mesmerizing, human, and heartbreaking. And remember, Darling comes into the Black Company as an abused, rescued child, right? Raven originally saves her, and Silent and Raven take care of her as an abused child. And there's this child amongst all of these despicable men with extraordinarily checkered pasts, all most certainly going to hell if that exists. And honestly, it just might or might not. Equal chance either way with this universe. But this child being deemed the white rose by the rebels, being deemed an important savior by Glenn Cook, by the narrative itself. This child comes to symbolize a lot for Silent and a lot for Raven too. The future, because both Silent and Raven, they have a lot of differences, but where I think they're similar is in a certain amount of fatalism and cosmic pessimism. I do believe that they are two characters who think that that they're as good as dead. Doesn't matter if they live or die. They've done all the good and all the bad that they're gonna do in this life, and then all of a sudden, they find themselves in the proximity of a figure like the White Rose, like Darling. and it provides them with this forward moral momentum that I think that both men thought they had lost long ago. And Silent, I think, is better suited to that moral forward momentum. And it's like he's given maybe the first lease on life ever. I was going to say a new lease on life, but it seems like when Silent is around Darling, he's more purposeful and he has more faith, more belief. Right before she shows up, Silent is quite a deadly, threatening character, especially compared to One Eye and Goblin. Silent is operating on a, you would think, a more sadistic level. But when Darling appears and the idolization occurs, the deification occurs. Like this, the Black Company is about what happens when you deify women, what happens when desperate nihilistic men deify women, making them the one thing that they will believe in, and all of the failures and successes that I think stem from that. So what happens when Silent deifies this child who grows into this savior, this leader of the rebellion? Well, rebellion itself has become deified by Silent. Morality itself has become deified by Silent. A a workable moral compass has been codified by Silent and Darling. Silent's lack of verbal communication did not result in him becoming cold or emotionless like Raven. And I don't think that Raven, actually, Wiki, I don't think Raven was cold or emotionless. I think he was one of the most pitifully emotional characters in this entire series. I really don't know where you're getting that. In fact, in The White Rose, Croker, the analyst, would write, whatever vow he had taken, whatever it was that had driven him to abstain from speech, it had put a steel lock on Silent's jaw. I have seen him so pissed he could chew nails, so excited he got sphincter so excited he lost sphincter control. But nothing has shaken his resolution against talking. Enigmatically, and unlike most other company brothers, Silent did not care about his reputation in the annals. However, he treasured the documents nonetheless, and apparently chose to preserve them over the company's treasure chest at a critical juncture in the group's history. That was it. That was it. Like, that's such a huge demonstration of the fact that Silent did, in fact, care deeply about the annals, about the history of the company, and about like its continued existence. And even though he didn't care about how he's remembered within them, to me, like that is a level of selfless that that I've never seen authentically. You know, most of the time, that kind of selflessness is deeply performative. With Silent, it's not. It's not. Although there's a lot of theatrics that come along, or seeming theatrics that come along with a character like Silent. I mean, the fact that he doesn't speak at all is, and it's by his choice. He's like non-vocal by choice. Like, there is a performative quality to that, but within that artifice, you finally, I think, recognize your space or your position within this like nihilist fantastical wasteland. Silent was a lower magnitude wizard, but his powers were nevertheless extremely effective against typical Black Company targets. His specialties were distinct from the other company wizards, One Eye and Goblin, who were primarily illusionists. He demonstrated the ability to control insects when he manipulated hornets to attack the Blues and avoid company soldiers during Mercy's raid on the Mole Tavern and Barrel. I think that's like the first time we see Silent. And yeah, ugh. It's quite an entrance. Like, It's really gothic and really creepy. Silent was an expert in infiltration and cloaking magic. During the capture and taking of Whisper in the Forest of Cloud, this is another Silent thing that I love. I love that he was there. He was undetected by both Soulcatcher and the lady despite close proximity. Undetected. That's why, like, he's a wizard of lower magnitude, but I think there's something secretly a lot more powerful about him. And then in Port of Shadows, it's as if that's a story where Mischievous Rain, another Taken, shows up with her shadow children, and a whole lot of stuff happens, but then everyone is kind of compelled to forget through a spell. But it makes it seem like Silent is the last one to remember, which does separate him from the others. And I think that I think there's something secretly, I think there's still a secret about him, is what I'm saying. At Maddie's Tavern in Tali, Silent produced noxious fumes which caused debilitating agony among rebel attackers. During that same event, he put out fires with his sorcery alone at the Battle of Juniper. He was trained well by the new Taken to accurately launch a kind of long-distance, sorcery-based artillery barrage. He was also a swift and skilled swordsman. Like most of his company brothers, Silent's life before joining the group is not discussed. It is known he was born in the southern continent. He took the company oath at some unspecified point after the brothers One Eye and Tom Tom joined in D-Lock, Alloc. But before Croker joined in Pedora, he was presumably born somewhere within the long stretch of territory between those two places. Vow of Silence. By the time he joined, he had already taken his namesake vow of silence. Nothing is revealed regarding why Silent took his vow. Croker summarized the situation as follows. He has not spoken in all the years I have known him, nor in the years he has been with the company, yet both One Eye and my predecessor as analyst say he is quite capable of speech, from hints accumulated over the years. It has become my firm conviction that in his youth, before he signed on, he swore a great oath never to speak, it being the iron law of the company not to pry into a man's life before he enlisted. I have been unable to learn anything about the circumstances. Croker commented that the captain deferred to another wizard, One Eye, when it came to sorcery because he, meaning the captain, cannot come to grips with Silent's refusal to talk. I love all these different characters in the Black Company. I love this world more than any other world. I'm so attached to the world and to all the characters, however pathetic they are. I'm attached to so many of them. But I love that they're all, you imagine that they all have massive skeletons in their closet, that they all have ghosts that they're trying desperately to outrun. And Silent is no different. In fact, Silent might be running from the most ghosts. He and Raven, at least, are running from the most ghosts possible. With Raven, it's the ghost of lineage, the ghost of family, the ghost of responsibility, the ghost of nobility. But with Silent, it's got to be something darker. I mean, it could very well be the same exact thing. We don't know. We have no idea where he came from. All we can do is put together what clues that we have in order to kind of build a fictive past, a fictive version of events that most complements the character that we know from the books of the North. I personally, I think that Silent did something really bad, or he lost people that were very important to him. But I think there's something about guilt, something about blame. You don't take a vow of silence necessarily as a measure of respect. I think that there's a lot of self-punishment. I think he's punishing himself by taking the vow of silence and sticking to it so steadfast, so unendingly sticking to his vow of silence, breaking it only once in this entire series, and we're going to read about the time he did that next. But I think even joining the Black Company is a form of self-punishment. I think Silent is a character who maybe secretly hates himself, and that's and wanted to die. You know, I don't think anyone really joins the Black Company without without a few screws loose, so to speak. But that's why Darling also is just so important, because he wants to live. He wants to be around her. He wants to be in her orbit. I think that, yeah, Raven and Silent are both two men who were trying to find creative ways to die and to punish themselves along the way for things that they did wrong out of shame and guilt. And both men had the opportunity to die for the same symbol, for the same woman, ultimately. But let's read about the time in the White Rose, the third book of the Black Company, the third book of the Books of the North, where Silent broke his vow of silence. After several battles, the Lady and Darling declared a truce and joined forces to defeat the Dominator. At the Barrowland, Raven was found and restored to health, but Silent had developed hostility towards him, as both were revealed to have a romantic interest in Darling, and Raven had caused Darling incredible heartbreak. I absolutely think that Silent is more than justified in his hostility toward Raven. Absolutely. Raven is a character that can't help abusing, discarding, treating miserably like the actual symbol of his liberation of his own personal freedom, like his last chance at some sort of decency within his life. And I think that Silent recognizes that within Darling and sanctifies it, deifies it, you know, whole lot of stuff. I mean, Raven probably deifies her too, only Raven's relationship with God is already hostile, is antagonistic. You know, there's a lot of complexity coming from both Silent and Raven in the ways that they interact with Darling. During the battle of the Barrowland, Silent slashed at the Dominator with a sword and skillfully evaded his enemy's attempts to strike back. But the lieutenant and Elmo were killed by the Dominator's blows when they attempted the same. Bro, and I love the lieutenant and Elmo. I love Elmo a lot. Those were some big losses. Big losses. In the aftermath of the battle, the Lady betrayed the alliance with Darling. She used Darling's true name to permanently strip her of her null. Silent, outraged and torn between his vow and his love for Darling, finally broke his silence and pronounced the Lady's true name, Dorothea Senjak, disarming her of her immense sorcery as well. Soon after, Croker convened an official convocation of all surviving members of the company at the Blue Willy. The band had been reduced to merely 10 men: Silent, Croker, One-Eye Goblin, Otto, Hagop, Mergen, and the three Torque brothers, Stubby, Paddlefoot, and Brother Bear. Wishing to stay with Darling, Silent and the Torque brothers chose not to head for the fabled Katovar. Honorably discharged, they parted ways from the remainder of the company. I think that's massively meaningful because let's follow my reading of it from just before. So I think that's valid. I think Silent was secretly suicidal in a lot of ways, but certainly inarguably self-hating and self-punishing, self-chastising. And I think that the Black Company provided him a vehicle to flirt with death as often as he pleased, and also flirt with moral nihilism as grotesquely as he wanted to feel even worse over time. You know how depressed people sometimes find themselves in cyclical recursive behavior patterns that just make them feel worse and worse and worse, and on some sick level it makes them feel better because they have such a low view of themselves. I think Silent was like that as well. But the fact that Darling, I think, provided something decent within his life, a symbol that he could actually love. He could abandon a huge part of that nihilism from before a huge part of self-hate and suicidal ideations that I think encompassed why he was in the Black Company. So he left for that. And of course, he broke that vow of silence. And I think the second he broke that vow of silence, he made a new vow of devotion to Darling. Right. I love that. I love that. Like I said earlier, that's one of my favorite moments in all of fantasy. It's one of the most beautiful moments, one of the most exciting, thrilling, and riveting moments I've ever read is when Silent actually speaks Dorothea Senjak, the lady's true name, and with finality brings the Books of the North, the White Rose, the entire The Lady saga to a close. It's incredible. Stunning. Before this video ends, we should probably talk about the Silver Spike. After the Silver Spike was stolen, Silent, Darling, and the Torque brothers were met by bowmans in the Windy Country. Silent's distrust of the ancient wizard was undisguised. They and their group of monsters from the Plane of Fear had several confrontations with the demented Limper and his loyal pet demon, Toadkiller Dog. The Limper in the Silver Spike is perhaps one of the most quintessential grimdark villains ever. It's a truly monstrous creation. Soulcatcher is my favorite fantasy villain of all time, but I think that Limper is extremely important when it comes to like the innovation within grimdark, within what Glenn Cook was doing, creating these truly grotesque villains. He rode with them on the back of a wind whale across the Sea of Torments, and survived the chaotic death and collapse of the giant creature outside the Temple of Traveler's Repose. In a chaotic fight outside the temple, Silent struck cold Toadkiller Dog with a bushel of ferocious snakes, distracting the demon from its murderous, headlong charge. Later on the ramparts of Orr, the superior wizard Bowmans was unable to stop the Limper from approaching the Silver Spike. So here we go. Silent sacrificed himself in order to further weaken the Taken. He transformed his own body into a substance that burned fiercely and jumped onto the Limper. This heroic suicide partially melted down the Limper's malformed clay shape, buying time for a wind whale to seal the Taken into a boiling trap prepared by exile. Silent's death immediately devastated Darling, who wept and pounded her fists relentlessly into the nearby rampart wall. Wow. Silver Spike is a really special book, man. And then Raven's death hits hard as well, directly following. It's insane. But they hit in two different ways, and they affect Darling in two different ways. And at the risk of being like overly male focused, I think that these books are saying a lot too, like about women, like the interiority of these women who have been deified by these pathetic, desperate, nihilistic men, searching for anything to live for. Because both Silent and Raven's death hit Darling in very different ways. And afterwards, like, she has been devastated by two romantic figures, two quasi-father figures, by two figures who saw in her something larger than life itself, placed her into a position of great power that may have been unfair to her agency, right? May have been. She ends up with Case, the narrator of that book, younger guy who didn't really buy into the whole Darling is the chosen one thing. And Darling found something attractive about that. And I think we all know what that is. I don't think women really like to be deified, honestly. At the end of the day, I don't think they like being gods in men's eyes, especially when those men are psychotics, like everyone in the Black Company is. The Lady is a special case. And the way that Croker deified her within his mind is a special case as well. The next character study video will be of Lady. So we're going to talk from the perspective, from the POV of one of these women who has been idolized and deified by so many men, myself included. Even I love the Lady, and that's what sort of makes so many of the deaths in the Black Company devastating and kind of heartbreaking, because they are these massive statements sometimes. Sometimes it's just casual, like, oh my God, the greatest character ever just got boiled alive. Blah, 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 blah. Let's move on really quick. And you're like, whoa, wait, let's not move on really quick. But that's how warfare operates, right? It's cruel and it's vicious. But then you get these kind of big statements, like the ones that we get from both Silent and Raven in the Barrowlands, and or at the end of the Silver Spike. And there are these massive statements, and those statements within them are quickly deflated. I use the word pathetic a lot to describe some of these deaths, and I mean that in the most cruel way too. It's relatably pathetic. Silent as a character is a devastating character, but like I said, he's one that I honestly do think I see more and more of myself within. Or I want to. Like, there's something I want to take from Silent. There's something I want to learn from him. There's something I think secretly powerful about him. There's a weight to his character, a secret, unbearable weight to Silent as a character. I think he's captivating and brilliant to grapple with like this. I think he's a perfect character, yeah. A perfect Grimdark character. A perfect wizard. I love him so much. I think I've said some pretty interesting things here in this video. I think we've stumbled into some interesting takes, and I think that we've learned some valuable things about Silent, about the wizard Silent from the Black Company. I love him very much. I hope you found something of value and something to be appreciated within this character study. I'm Zach. Bye for now.